Well, the U.S. Senate is about to gavel in for the day. They'll have an hour of general speeches before continuing work on a bill reauthorizing votes are expected throughout the day. Live coverage of the Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
Let us pray. O God, the hope of the world, let your kingdom come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Fill the minds of our lawmakers with your truth so that they will labor for freedom with integrity and compassion. Lord, use them to establish your rule in the life of our nation. May they be guides who lead us away from sin, sorrow, and destruction toward truth, justice, and peace. Shelter them in their coming in and going out, in their labor and leisure, as they seek to advance your kingdom. We pray in your sovereign name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., February 16, 2011. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a Senator from the State of New York, to perform the duties of the Chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Following any leader remarks, there will be a period of morning business until 11 a.m. Senators are permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each during that time. That time will be equally divided and controlled between the leaders or the designees. At 11 this morning, the Senate will resume consideration of the FAA authorization bill. As a result of cloture being filed yesterday, any germane first-degree amendments must be filed at the desk prior to 1 p.m. today in order for the amendments to be in order post-cloture. We have the opportunity to complete this legislation tomorrow. There will be 2 cloture votes in the morning, and we hope to be able to have some votes today, and senators will be notified when roll call votes are scheduled.
Madam President.
Republican Leader.
Are we in a quorum call?
No, we are not.
As the debate over government spending comes into focus this week, I think it's worth noting once again how this debate has shifted in recent weeks. After 2 years of bailouts and stimulus bills, we're finally talking about how much government should cut instead of how much it should spend. Obviously, the details matter, and we'll be working those out in the weeks ahead. But the fact that this debate has shifted is a testament to the millions of Americans who insisted that their voices be heard on this issue. They've made a difference. It's important that we acknowledge all of that. Now the question shifts to whether those in power will actually follow through in a serious way. Will Democrat leaders in Washington really do something to rein in a government we can no longer afford? Or will they just pretend to and hope that the American people focus on their words instead of their actions? Unfortunately, the early signs are discouraging. The President's approach to the growing national alarm about spending and debt was a proposal to freeze government spending at the already irresponsible levels that he himself has set over the last 2 years, levels that, if maintained, will only intensify the current crisis by putting us deeper and deeper in debt. The consensus on the President's proposal is that it is both unserious and irresponsible, and that despite what the President may say, he is not in fact treating this crisis with the seriousness it demands. The President even seemed to concede the point yesterday, saying his budget wasn't adequate to the task and suggesting that maybe Congress could do something more meaningful than he has. And what do we find in Congress? Well, we find one party in the House of Representatives making a genuine effort to cut spending and debt. And we find Democrats in the Senate announcing today that they intend to line up behind the President's timid proposal for a partial spending freeze. In other words, Democrat leaders in Congress intend to join the President in resigning themselves to a future of growing debts and deficits at a time when Americans are demanding cuts instead. So here's what we've learned this week. On the most pressing issue of the day, the President and Democratic leaders in Congress have decided to take a pass. They're either unwilling to admit that Washington needs to live within its means, or they're completely unwilling to make the tough choices that will get us there. It's really hard to believe. Americans are screaming at us to do something about a $14 trillion debt. The President proposes a budget that nearly doubles it, and Democrats clap their hands in approval. Maybe Democrats were so focused on passing their health care bill last year they didn't notice what's been going on in Europe. Maybe they were so focused on defending their stimulus that they missed a national uprising right here at home about the spending and the debt that they've racked up. Maybe they missed the fact that while we were busy adding $3 trillion to the debt, nearly 3 million Americans lost their jobs. Maybe they've been so focused on passing their agenda that they didn't notice the fact that the American people just repudiated their entire agenda. They need to get real. The men and women who were sent to Washington this year weren't sent here on a mission to keep spending at the levels this administration has set. They were sent here to change the culture, to convince the administration that it needs to change its ways. Democrats in Washington seem to think that they can just wait it out, that if they just agree to freeze current spending levels in place, people will think they're listening. Don't they realize that current levels of spending are the reason we just had the biggest wave election in a generation? The senior senator from New York seems to think that anything short of freezing current spending levels is extreme. I'll tell you what's extreme. Extreme is to insist in the middle of a jobs and debt crisis that government has to spend $1 trillion more than we take in every year. That's what is extreme. That's extreme. Extreme is a view of the world that says government will not live within its means, even when the American people are demanding it. Extreme is a view of the world that says the survival of that program is more important than the survival of the American dream itself. Extreme is telling our children they may have to do without because we refuse to do with less. So I would suggest to my Democratic colleagues to stop thinking about what they can get away with and start thinking about what's actually needed to solve this crisis. I suggest they start listening to the American people who are telling us in no uncertain terms that a freeze won't cut it. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 11 a.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President.
Senator from Maine.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that proceedings under the call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to proceed for 15 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, Americans are resilient. Throughout our nation's history, we have stood up to every challenge and we have stood together. At this moment in history, we face the challenge of recovering from the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Through no fault of their own, too many Americans have lost their jobs and continue to struggle to find work in this tough economy. Putting Americans back to work is the key to economic recovery and must be the #1 goal for this Congress. Today, I offer my own 7-point plan to help us reach that goal. This jobs plan recognizes that small businesses are America's job creators, and thus our efforts must be targeted toward helping small businesses start up, grow, and prosper. In Maine alone, we have 141,000 small businesses. During the past decade, America's small firms have created about 70% of all new jobs. But far too often, Congress directs federal policies and attention toward those businesses deemed too big to fail. Instead, we must redirect our efforts toward those small businesses that are too entrepreneurial to ignore. The plan that I'm introducing today is based on extensive conversations that I have had with small business owners and workers throughout the state of Maine. It also represents a great deal of hard work by my staff. While each state has its own particular opportunities and challenges, the fundamentals of a jobs-oriented economic recovery are similar everywhere. As I illustrate my 7-point plan with examples from my home state of Maine, I believe that the presiding officer and my colleagues will recognize similarities in their own home states. First, my plan to build a 21st century economy begins with building a 21st century workforce. America's greatest asset is its people. Ensuring that American workers get the education and job training that they need to compete in an increasingly global economy must be a top priority. My plan amends the Workforce Investment Act to place special emphasis on job training programs that assist our manufacturing industry. I'm tired of seeing so many manufacturing jobs leave my state and our nation to go overseas. It's important that we have a strategy to work with manufacturers, to work with local community colleges and universities to develop the manufacturing-based curriculum, job training programs, and research opportunities to ensure that this generation and the next have the education and skills for the jobs of today and tomorrow. Some of those manufacturing jobs are gone forever, but others are coming online, and America must lead, and Congress must support targeted funding to help provide the resources for this education and training. In addition, we must provide workforce development assistance to those communities harmed as a direct consequence of the closure or realignment of military installations. For example, the state of Maine is expected to lose more than 6,500 military and civilian jobs following the decisions made by the Base Realignment and Closure Commission in 2005. We're losing the Brunswick Naval Air Station in our state. There are many other states, Illinois, Missouri, New Jersey, that are facing similar losses. In Virginia, nearly 40,000 jobs will be lost. In such cases where decisions made at the federal level directly affect local employment, we have a special obligation to make sure that displaced workers have the training and the education that they need to find new employment in their communities. After all, these communities have structured their economies to support military operations for decades in many cases. Now that that linchpin of the local economy is being pulled out, surely we have an obligation to help with the adjustment. My plan would redirect Economic Development Administration funds, EDA resources, to those communities most harmed by these decisions. Targeted federal funds can also be a catalyst for new economic opportunities. For example, I worked to secure one-time funding for a radiologic technician training program at a Maine community college. This program had broad support from local hospitals, from the college, but they simply couldn't afford the expensive equipment to get the program underway. With that one-time federal investment, the program is now completely self-sustaining. It produces between 18 and 20 graduates a year. Job placement has been 100%, with graduates earning starting salaries of about $40,000 a year. And I'm sure that similar targeted job training success stories can be found in every state, and we ought to build on them. We must also fix what has not worked as well as it should. Government agencies must provide more efficient and productive services to the American people. The Department of Labor, for example, should reduce paperwork and red tape associated with federal job training programs. The department should identify ways that it could cut costs by working more closely with other government entities, such as the Department of Education, and with the private sector. The best programs I've seen at community colleges, for example, combine some job training funds with commitments from private employers to hire the graduates and to help shape those job training programs, so that we're training people for the jobs that exist or that are going to exist. The second part of my plan would encourage innovation in Maine's natural resource-based economy, and nowhere is there greater potential than in energy. I want the United States to lead the world in developing renewable energy technologies. And that is going to require significant private and public investments to develop this technology and to make its deployment affordable. For example, deep-water offshore wind has enormous potential to help us meet our nation's electricity needs, and it presents an exciting opportunity to create thousands of much-needed, good-paying and sustainable green jobs. Estimates show that the development of just 5 gigawatts of offshore wind off the coast of Maine, and that's just a fraction of the overall potential, could power more than 1 million homes, attract $20 billion of investment, and create more than 15,000 green energy jobs that would be sustained over 30 years. Deepwater offshore wind is the key transformative technology that America needs in order to compete globally. Europe, China, Japan, our technology competitors continue to make far larger investments in offshore wind R&D than we do. I'm proud of the work of the University of Maine and the Deep Sea Wind Consortium with private sector involvement to deploy floating wind turbines, which would be the first of its kind in the world, placing the United States in a position to lead in deepwater offshore wind technology. Federal investments and programs to spur the advancement of deepwater offshore wind is an investment in America's future. Federal and state seed funding is expected to yield up to $4 billion in private sector investment over the next 10 years in Maine alone. And with these investments, Maine is well positioned to be a global leader in this promising source of alternative energy. We must not lose these jobs to China, as has increasingly occurred with solar technology. Let's not have it happen with deepwater offshore wind technology. We must also do more to promote agricultural exports. I know this is an issue of great interest to the presiding officer. In Maine, blueberries, potatoes, and lobster help sustain and create jobs in our state. Every $1 billion in agricultural exports supports 12,000 jobs. Therefore, increasing exports of our agricultural products could play an important role in reviving our economy. Boosting support for the Department of Agriculture's foreign agricultural services will help promote our homegrown natural products abroad. This effort to increase agricultural exports could be paid for by strengthening our effort to curtail wasteful agricultural subsidies, such as payments to very wealthy corporate farmers who frankly do not need federal assistance. The corn-based ethanol tax break is another example of an extraordinarily expensive subsidy costing taxpayers some $6 billion annually, which has produced a host of problems, from higher grain prices to impaired engine performance. We must reevaluate all programs that have not performed as promised and then reallocate their funding to job creation initiatives and to deficit reduction. Third, we simply must do more to encourage job creation and investment by small business. My plan includes a series of tax reform proposals targeted at these engines of job growth. The tax package agreed to by Congress and the President in December included a 2% cut in the employee portion of the payroll tax, but no cut was provided for the employer portion of the payroll tax. With unemployment stuck above 9% for 21 consecutive months, we must do more to encourage businesses to hire. And when I talk to small businesses, they tell me This is something we could do that would directly reduce the cost of hiring and encourage them to bring on more workers. My proposal includes a 2% reduction of the employer portion of the payroll tax on the first $50,000 of payroll for a worker for 1 year. This reduction in the employer portion of the payroll tax is estimated to lead to the creation of 1.4 million jobs. This will work, Madam President. As with the employee side payroll tax relief that we passed in December, my proposal would require the Treasury to reimburse the Social Security Trust Fund using general revenues. And again, the cost of this payroll tax relief can be offset by eliminating the ethanol and other wasteful subsidies and by implementing budget cuts for discretionary spending. Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent, since there are no other members seeking recognition. There is another member seeking recognition. I would ask unanimous consent that I be allowed to proceed for just 5 more minutes, if that is acceptable.
Let me just explain, if I could. We have both the President of the Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO waiting for me right now. If I could move in here, you can have all the time you want.
Madam President, I will reserve the balance of the time that I had requested, ask that my speech be shown in the record as not interrupted, and yield to my friend and colleague, the senior senator from Oklahoma.
And I really appreciate that.
Senator from Oklahoma, without objection.
That's very nice of you. We are trying to resolve one of the great problems that I'm sure the senator from Maine is sensitive to, and that is the infrastructure of this country. And we have 2 witnesses next to each other, the head of the AFL-CIO and the head of the United States Chamber of Commerce, to show that liberals, conservatives, labor, industry all feel this should be at least the 2nd highest priority in America. And thank you. I appreciate your yielding and allowing me to do this. I'll make this fairly quick. When I heard the President's budget yesterday and I looked at it, I shook my head in disbelief. You know, $8.7 trillion in new spending, $1.6 trillion in new taxes, all these things. I remembered back when I was complaining in 1996 at this very podium. That was during the Clinton administration. That was his budget. That was $1.5 trillion. Did you know, Madam President, that the deficit in this President's budget is greater than the entire budget of 1996? To run this whole thing called America. And it just was a shocker to me. And it reminded me that people talk about the entitlements. Yeah, we're going to have to do something with that. But something we can do with right now is something I tried to do last year and the House members are trying to do right now. And that is, when the President gave his message was in that message, he talked about how he was going to freeze non-defense discretionary spending, and everyone applauded, thinking that was a great austerity program. In reality, he's talking about after he has increased it from 2008 levels to 2010 levels, and then freezing those increases in. Now, that's what I find unreasonable. So I reintroduce, it's Senate Bill 360, I have a whole lot of co-sponsors, to wind back the discretionary spending to 2008 levels and then freeze it at 2008 levels. Now, I'll just tell you briefly what the bill does. It reduces the non-security spending to 2008 levels. We'll hold it there for 5 years to 2016. After that, the spending will be allowed to increase with the CPI inflation between 2017 and 2021. The amount of money that would be saved by this in that period of time would be over $1 trillion. Now, put the chart up here. This chart shows what's going to happen if we don't do this. The red is what is projected in the President's budget. The blue is what's projected if we are successful in doing this. I'm very proud that the House of Representatives, the Republicans, in their budget have put together my bill that I had last year that I'm reintroducing today as S-360 as part of their budget. I think it's responsible, and we will be looking forward to getting co-sponsors. And I thank, again, the distinguished senator from Maine for allowing me to bust in on you on this. Thank you.
Madam President.
Senator from Maine.
Thank you, Madam President. There are other provisions in my bill that are targeted towards small business. For example, Section 179 is a provision of the tax code that small businesses have found to be very helpful. It allows them to immediately expense equipment purchases rather than depreciate those purchases over many years. I also would propose making permanent the tax provision allowing restaurants to depreciate equipment over 15 years rather than 39.5 years. Think about it. If a restaurant's only renovating once every 40 years, that's not going to be very feasible nor attractive to its patrons. The plan would also reduce the depreciation periods on commercial and residential buildings to 15 years to encourage investment and jumpstart the economy. We did that back in 1981, and it worked. My fourth point is one that some small business owners that I know would put at the very top of the list of what we should do, and that is we need to reduce the red tape that ties them up in knots. Let me provide an illustration. We need to make sure that federal regulations do not impose an unnecessary burden on job creation. The EPA has proposed a new regulation known as the Boiler MACT. This rule, as originally proposed, could cost Maine businesses $640 million to comply with, despite the fact that there are less costly approaches to deal with boiler emissions. It also has federal agencies working at cross purposes. Here we have the Department of Energy trying to encourage the conversion to biomass boilers at the same time that the EPA is putting burdensome new regulations on them. The result in Maine was the Department of Energy awarded one Maine high school a $300,000 grant to help buy a new wood pellet boiler to reduce the school's use of fossil fuels. But because EPA's proposed regulations would have greatly increased the cost of that boiler, the school board ended up turning down the grant. So this is an example where the right hand did not know what the left was doing. My point is that federal agencies should take into account the impact on small businesses and job growth before imposing new rules. So thus, my plan contains several provisions to help reduce onerous regulations and cut red tape. First, it requires federal agencies to analyze the indirect costs of regulations, such as the impact on job creation, the cost of energy, consumer prices. Second, it obligates federal agencies to comply with public notice and comment requirements and prohibits them from circumventing these requirements by issuing unofficial rules as, quote, guidance documents. And third, it creates a mechanism to protect small businesses from onerous penalties the very first time they fail to comply with a paperwork requirement, as long as no harm comes from that failure. If it's an honest first-time mistake that causes no harm, why do we want to slap that small business with a heavy fine? That doesn't make sense. The fifth point in my plan is aimed at our transportation policies. Getting raw materials to the factory or farm and finished products to market quickly, efficiently, and safely must be a priority. But the inconsistent and inequitable federal policy on truck weight limits on interstate highways provides a telling example of where we're doing the opposite. And the consequences are particularly acute in Maine. I've spoken on this issue many times, so I'm just going to briefly describe it. Maine's businesses and trucking firms are currently at a competitive disadvantage because federal law prohibits the heaviest trucks from using federal interstates and instead diverts them to downtown streets and secondary roads. This means, for example, that nearly 260 miles of non-turnpike interstates that are the major economic corridors in my state are off limits. Yet these same trucks are permitted on many federal interstates in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, parts of New York State, and neighboring provinces in Canada. So that makes Maine and Vermont an island of non-competitiveness. It just doesn't make sense. The heaviest trucks belong on the roads built for them. In 2009, I authored a law to establish a one-year pilot project to allow trucks weighing up to 100,000 pounds to travel on Maine's federal interstates. This project was an enormous success. It helped to preserve and create jobs because it allowed our businesses to be more efficient. It lowered fuel costs. It resulted in fewer emissions, carbon emissions, and it made our roads safer. So working with Senator Leahy, I'm trying to make this permanent. Point number 6, we must invest in America's future. Research and development investment is critical to the breakthroughs that we need to keep our economy competitive and to create good-paying jobs. The R&D tax credit provides an important incentive, but it needs to be updated so more companies can benefit from it, and there needs to be more certainty. Just having that tax credit from year to year discourages the kind of long-range planning and investment that companies need. So my plan includes a 5-year extension of the R&D tax credit. That's likely to happen, but by doing it year by year by year, we create all this incentive, these disincentives for investment. Finally, the 7th point in my plan would help expand opportunities for small businesses and farmers to do business with the federal government. We need to help our small businesses, our farmers, tap into markets that they have not previously explored. And as the former head of the New England Small Business Administration, I know how essential this drive for new markets is for job creation and for our economy. So one approach that we're going to take is my Washington and state offices are going to redouble their efforts to help small businesses reach the federal government, because the federal government is the largest consumer of goods and services in our country. I know that disturbs a lot of Americans right now, and it shows the size of the federal government. The fact is the federal government purchases more than $535 billion worth of goods and services in this past fiscal year. Some 23% of that spending is directed to small business, and last year the value of federal contracts to small businesses in my state alone was more than $250 million. So if we can expand the opportunity for small businesses to do business with the federal government, that's a brand new market for their products and services. Last year, along with my colleague Senator Snowe and in conjunction with the Department of Defense Northeast Regional Council and the Maine Procurement Technical Assistance Center, I sponsored a small business matchmaker conference that brought together government agencies and prime contractors with our small business community to match up the purchasing needs with goods and services. It was a 3-day conference in South Portland. It was a tremendous success. We had about 385 small business owners and representatives from 135 government agencies and prime contractors looking to subcontract work meet face-to-face, sit down, exchange ideas. And let me give you an example of a successful connection that was made. A representative of a $2 billion aerospace company sat across the table from the owner of a 40-employee Maine machine shop with experience in very high-quality, high-end custom work. That first meeting led to a significant business relationship that continues to grow. And I would note that at our conference in South Portland, our total number of registrants was 597 people, and that just shows how eager our small businesses are to expand their customer base. And one great benefit of the matchmaker approach is instead of a small business working for weeks or even months to try to find the right person in the vast government bureaucracy or the right prime contractor, our entrepreneurs merely need to sit down across the table with them. It's direct, effective, and efficient. But obviously it's not easy to do business with Uncle Sam. The rules and regulations are often strict, cumbersome, and unfamiliar, and that's where our offices can help. My plan also calls for Congress to work harder to open up the federal marketplace beyond the Washington Beltway to entrepreneurs in every state. That will benefit our job creators and the American taxpayer because there'll be more competition. Madam President, the struggling economy has challenged our nation's entrepreneurial spirit, but that spirit remains strong in Maine, in your state of New York, and across the nation. We will recover from this deep recession, but the recovery depends on the right policies in Washington to encourage the innovative and bold job creators of America. And that means helping our small businesses start up, grow, prosper, sustain, and create good jobs. My 7-point jobs plan offers a straightforward path forward for Congress to lead rather than impede job creation at this critical juncture in our history and in our recovery. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Madam President.
Senator from Kansas.
Madam President, I understand that